Today's video is 100% spoiler free, and that's important because this is going to be my initial review for Anthem. I say initial because we're going to be revisiting this review of Anthem and updating it as time goes on. Anthem is, after all, a live service game, and BioWare is going to be expanding it with free DLC for anyone who owns the base game. That means whenever there's a substantial change to Anthem's experience, whenever it's made better or worse, we'll do some form of a state-of-the-game style update to this initial review. But we gotta start somewhere, and I wanted to get this out before the 22nd, so a lot of you could have a better idea of what to expect, at least from my personal experience, if you decide to pick up Anthem on the 22nd. Now keep in mind, BioWare already has another Day 1 patch coming on the 22nd. These are the horrors of utilizing Origin Premiere's early access feature. It has been nothing but a nightmare for this game, and I could ramble about it for a hell of a lot longer, but we won't. All you need to know is that there are going to be several bug fixes, changes to certain javelins like the Colossus, and a lot of quality of life improvements coming on the 22nd. We're not going to be nitpicking too hard on bugs and balancing across like javelins and weapons. We're going to be talking more so about the overall Anthem experience. What you get if you buy the game, make your way through the main story arc, dive into the additional story arcs for the faction leaders, and start to make your way into endgame. That's pretty much the experience Anthem has to offer right now. Keeping in mind that BioWare already has plans for events this weekend after the game releases on Friday, as well as this Wednesday when people only on Origin Premiere or EA Access are going to be going hands-on with it. So let's just say this, okay? I'm really stoked with the way BioWare is already responding to feedback. In fact, for those of you who don't know, there was already an exploit found. Not really an exploit, but basically you could go on out into the open world in Grandmaster difficulty and just farm open world chests and get legendaries and masterworks out of these chests. So people were just farming and skipping endgame by doing that. BioWare, within a few hours, was able to update server side. And that's one of the great things about the way they built Anthem, is that they can make all of these changes without having to push patches through certification. So the game is set up to have a bright future, but I will tell you right now, it's off to a very rocky start. A little bit better than Destiny 1 maybe, and depending on what you like about the core gameplay loop, there might be a lot here to love. Depending on what you don't like though, there might not be that much here for you. So let's actually dive into the review. I've decided to break the Anthem experience up into 4 pillars. The first one being the core gameplay experience, the second being cinematics and story, the third being Fort Tarsis, and the fourth being the open world. If we touch on that first pillar, core gameplay, this is where I think a lot of people will very quickly be able to decide whether or not Anthem is going to be worth their $60. You see, me personally, this is my hook. The combat, the flight mechanics, this is the reason I adore Anthem. It's the thing that attracted me to the game in the first place. It's the thing that I've spent the most time talking about pre-release, and it's the thing I spent the most time talking about after my time with the demo. I played over 45 hours of that demo, not because of content, but because of that core gameplay experience. Sometimes there's just a mechanic or a set of mechanics that make up a part of an experience in a game that hook you so hard you don't really care about all the other flaws that game might contain. That is very much my personal case with Anthem, which is why I think I'm a bit of an outlier for just how much I've enjoyed this game. If you played the demo and you didn't care that much for the combat and the flying and it wasn't that big of a deal to you, I would not recommend picking up Anthem. Because as you get deeper into the experience and you start to dive into the main missions and even the additional story arcs, there is a huge lack of variety and diversity within the mission designs themselves. More than I expected, but I'll be honest, BioWare's strong point has never really been variety or diversity when it's come to the gameplay design of their missions, which is why I think they always relied on the Mako, and they sort of vehicle-style missions across the Mass Effect franchise because they broke up the pacing of what was otherwise just a bunch of third-person combat. But of course, Mass Effect didn't really need to have hyper-strong combat engagements because the variety and the diversity came from the storytelling, the player choice, and the narrative. It's not to say that Anthem doesn't deliver on some of those things, but it's nowhere near the level of Mass Effect when it comes to how the player influences those things, and therefore I don't think the cinematics and the story, as much as I've enjoyed them, as we'll talk about in a moment, can really carry the weight of the lack of variety and diversity within the mission design itself. I was really disappointed to not even see really any missions utilizing the flight mechanics for extended periods of time. Outside of what happens in that core gameplay loop, the game doesn't really ask you to race through a tunnel while there's a bunch of explosions going off, or maybe even escort a Strider as it walks its way across Bastion. It's definitely one of the more disappointing parts of the Anthem gameplay experience, but again, if you really adore that core combat loop, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal to you. The game does remind me a lot of Diablo in this way. It's a lot of trudging through a bunch of enemies and mobs, but if you like killing those mobs, it's not really a trudge. It's a good old shooting, flying, and combo blasting time taking out hordes of bad guys, and that's where the game works for me, but I can definitely acknowledge where it falls short. Let's talk cinematics and story, because this is without a doubt the biggest surprise that Anthem delivered for me personally. I knew there was going to be storytelling, and BioWare is very clear that they were trying to tell a significant and cohesive story. What we ended up getting was something that's actually really on par with what we saw back during those E3 presentations. The cinematics for this game are phenomenal, and while the story itself is a bit poorly paced, I actually really enjoyed it. It's no Mass Effect. It's not going to be this original masterpiece, at least not right now. Maybe it could grow into that, but I still had such a stunning time with it, and I think it all comes down to the delivery of its characters. I fell in love with this game's characters. Halleck, Faye, Owen, even some of the characters whose names I won't mention that we only really meet for a scene or two to further the plot, they're so well represented and their personalities are so fleshed out through their voice acting and the animations in these cinematics that I just found myself connecting with them. I found myself grinning and laughing at who they were and what they were doing in any of those given scenes. It did a lot for me, and I sort of got that supernatural effect going on that I always reference, where I didn't really care so much about the grand story arc and how poorly paced it was or where it might have been disappointing. I was just more excited to see that these characters existed and that there was a very good chance I was going to get more of them in the future if BioWare was really able to deliver on those expansions to the game's storytelling experience. That's really what I want. I just want to know more about the adventures of my character and Halleck and Faye and Owen and the rest of the people I've gotten to interact with and meet in my time in Anthem's story and in Anthem's world. If BioWare can deliver more of that, then they've got plenty of opportunities to improve the storytelling experience, to tell better stories, and I'll be there. I mean, the DLC is free, so sign me up, man. Again, this was a huge surprise for me. It's not as if there's a bunch of like full-blown player choice and consequence here, but I still liked the story they had to tell, and again, more importantly, I loved the characters that were there to be a part of that story, and in many ways, to deliver that story. Let's talk Fort Tarsis, because this is my biggest point of contention in Anthem so far. It's such a mixed bag. I adore the aesthetic of Anthem, especially when we get into the civilizations. Like Fort Tarsis, it's this very rustic, low sci-fi tech, civilization. People are still growing their own crops and trading food and selling things in little, storefront stalls. I love that. I want to buy a house in Fort Tarsis and cozy on up and wake up every morning and tinker on someone's javelin, even if I'm not the javelin pilot myself. The mood is there, but it's like the rest of the experience that is Fort Tarsis. It's like the switch has been turned off. It looks like it has all of the pieces of a living and breathing location, but it just feels so dead. And I think a part of that is the lack of interaction with the actual Fort Tarsis. We'll talk about optional character dialogue in a second. But when it comes to interacting with the fort and buying things from the vendors, you can't. Even when you look at Prospero and one of the other vendors that's going to show up in the game, they activate the same storefront. You open it up and it's just the same silly menu where you can buy the cosmetics, where you can buy crafting components, and where you can redeem items from bonuses. That's it. They don't even actually have separate storefronts. It's such a silly and head-scratching decision. I don't understand it. And it lacks a lot of the flair that you get in a typical role-playing game where I could just go up and have a drink at the bar or buy some fruit someone and eat it just because role-playing, right? If you're going to give me this big, expansive space, make it more than just a checklist of ways in which I acquire new missions. It makes me long for something far more simple, especially while I'm currently playing Metro Exodus, where these little safe houses are just get in and get out, and they have so much more value for me personally from sort of a hangout roleplay standpoint than Fort Tarsis does. It makes me wish that they would have maybe abandoned Fort Tarsis as a hub and had it just be a part of the cinematics and allow us to just go back to our Strider. Let us really feel like we're lost out in the wilds. But this is the path they've chosen, and maybe over time with some improvements to audio mixing and improvements to the AI and the ways we can interact with the storefronts in Fort Tarsis, it could have some life breathed into it. They could flip that switch on, if you will. But let's talk about those optional character dialogues, because this is easily one of my more favorite parts of Fort Tarsis. And again, even though there's no full-blown player choice and consequence here, like in Mass Effect, I've still enjoyed coming back to the fort and just hanging out and talking with Lucky Jack, checking out on Freelancer Wraith, seeing what sort of sexy danger she's getting into. Again, the characters really drive this home for me personally. And I'm not some like ultra storytelling snob, so maybe that's why this just works for me. I don't have like ridiculous expectations of, oh god, they did this. I just like coming back and talking to these people. And I like that I do have some influence on where their story goes next. So when I talk to Lucky Jack and I suggest that he goes and checks out this Arcanist mystery on his next expedition, and then he tells me about this crazy story where he's saving grabbits, I'm like, yeah, this is cool. I want to talk to Lucky Jack more. I want to see what's going on with Freelancer Wraith and her problem with the Outlaws. And, you know, you get to see the consequence through storytelling in Fort Tarsis. It's never experienced by the player in a gameplay perspective, but it still works for me. And I like that it's optional, because it means I can spend the time I want to spend in that, but then I can also just have a day where I just go out and shoot stuff all day long. So, again, Fort Tarsis, some good, some bad. It's like this 50-50 split for me the majority of the time. I like it and I don't like it. I know it could be better, is I guess the best way that I could put that. Let's talk about Bastion, Anthem's open world, because, Bastion. Anthem has been a very interesting experience for me, because there's so much of the game that I absolutely adore, to the point where I just want to spend nothing doing those things. But then when I really look beyond those things, I start to see where the game has like just chunks of what feels like dated game design. And I feel like most of it can be improved, but in the case of Bastion, I feel like this is one area where BioWare is really going to struggle to make Bastion better than it currently is. So I'll say this, it is one of my favorite places to spend time, to just waste time. That has everything to do with the flight mechanic and the verticality and the depth of the open world that is Bastion. Like flying into all these underwater caverns and exploring and getting rewarded with loot chests and just enjoying the insane height and scale of some of the areas in Bastion, I absolutely adore it. But it is very clearly a sandbox that has been built for nothing more than the freelancers. For you as a player in your Javelin. It feels like it was 100% built around that. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, isn't that a good thing? No, not necessarily. If you're trying to make an open world that feels like it has actual life in it, whether that's wildlife or the enemy factions that we're supposed to encounter, then it has to make sense for those factions to navigate that environment as well. Number one, they don't. All of the enemy spawns in the game for Bastion are very static. Unbelievably so. You almost never see enemies moving from one point to the next. Even wyverns just kind of spawn in the sky and fly around one area. They're not flying routes. The Tassadors, the Gravits, they're all kind of grouped in one place. The same thing with the Outlaws and the Scars. They all kind of just hang out in one location. Sometimes it's like one of their actual forts, so it makes sense. Sometimes it's just a random area where they constantly show up. This sort of thing works in a game like Destiny, where the open world chunks are much smaller, and you are spending a lot of time moving without ever really questioning why the enemies aren't moving. It just makes sense that they're all kind of bundled up in these places. But in a location like Bastion that is so massive, the lack of Dominion convoys, the lack of outlaw patrols, the lack of Striders running any sort of a course from one point to the next makes Bastion feel unbelievably dead. Plain and simple, all of the life that was showcased in that original E3 trailer, BioWare has been able to achieve none of that. And again, I always look at E3 trailers as benchmarks, right? Like they want to try and achieve that. How much of that can they achieve? And when it comes to the flight systems and that core gameplay loop, they've nailed that. I think that's the one area they've 100%ed, right? But when it comes to Bastion and it actually feeling like a living, breathing place where threats are, constantly going about doing their own thing and there's Striders running convoys from one point to the next, not at all. And you'll get like Strider free roam activities that pop up, but it's just a down Strider in the middle of a location where it doesn't even make sense. Like there's no way the Strider could have walked to where it now got shot down by a Titan or by a group of outlaws. And it totally crushes the believability of Bastion as anything more than a sandbox for you in your superhero suit. If they could improve the AI, And if they could actually start creating some routing and some pathing, maybe Bastion would feel more alive. But when you look at the terrain, and again, you look at the way it's designed, it doesn't even look like there's that many places where a Strider could even be set on a course to go from one point to the next. It's easily my favorite place and also the most disappointing part of Anthem for me, because it is the one place where I really wanted them to achieve some of that E3 benchmark, and they've achieved so little of it. Let's talk microtransactions. I know everybody wants to hear about this. We can't really 100% say for sure on some of this stuff. So we can talk about the actual store and what it's like to spend real money. A full legendary set is going to run you about $8, but the minimum currency conversion here is 10, so there's a little bit of overcharge there. That's like the worst part of these currency systems. As my one buddy puts it, it's like carnival tokens, and I couldn't agree more. I hate it, but at least it's a $2 overcharge. You can spend that on some of the other small items in the store. Unlike Apex Legends, which as much as I adore that game, their overcharge for cosmetics is absolutely dog shit right now. So this is, of course, very subjective. To you, $10 might be way too much for a full legendary set. The thing for me is that you can earn them in-game, so I'm okay with that. And this is where I've yet to be able to get a really clear definition on how that in-game coin economy is going to work. It's way too early, and there's a lot of people who have actually had bugs with the amount of coin that they were given at the start of the game. Everybody's going to get a chunk of coin from BioWare. Some people were given like 200,000 coin. I know MTash was. 200,000 coin. That's a ridiculous amount. I don't think I even earned that much in my playtime. I think I maybe got up to like 180k plus what I was given at the start. So it's too hard to tell right now. There are challenges that are finite. You can do them once, it seems, and then you earn the coin, and that's that. A lot of the coin is going to be earned through the Alliance system, weeklies, dailies, and monthlies. So I want to give it at least a couple weeks before I can really talk about what that in-game economy is like. And hopefully, if people start figuring things out and they're able to get a more concise answer on how long it takes to earn, say, one legendary set at like, I think it's 61,000 coin, BioWare will start responding. If people feel like it's really unfair. There is more we can talk about, though, with the cosmetics, and there are some answers we still don't have that drive me crazy. So we do now know that you can unlock wear states for your suit and raw metal finishes via the faction challenges. There's also 2 graphics you can unlock that I've spotted via challenges as well. I really like the idea of this system. This reminds me of a good old video game when you would actually unlock cosmetics and new pieces of gear, or special colors for your Spartan suit in Halo when you finish the campaign, getting the different armor sets in Halo 3, for example, by doing the different weird challenges. This reminds me of that, and I like that, but we don't know what the hell's going on with the other cosmetics right now. There's like 2 sets of armor for each javelin in the game, and then there's those 2 graphics you can unlock, plus the ones that are already available to be purchased straight out, and then there's the raw materials and a couple other patterns available in the material store as well. Your Anthem asked Ben Irving about this, and he says that that system is tied to a feature they haven't talked about yet, and they're going to be talking about it this week. So hopefully we will know about that before the game goes live on the 22nd. I adore BioWare's transparency through a lot of this, but there's so much stuff that they haven't talked about, and I don't understand why. The only thing I can think is that, yeah, this game needed more time in development, and I think that's very clear. It could have benefited from another 6 months in development, but they had to get it out the door. And you know what? They're going to get it out. Hopefully there will be a community there, people like myself who still like a lot of the game, who want to see it improve, that can help them make it even better than it would have been in 6 months had they done that behind closed doors, in development outside of the public. So we'll see. Again, I like the idea of challenges allowing you to unlock armor pieces and unlock graphics. I think that's a great way of doing things. And I think it's very important that there is a chunk of cosmetics that are available through challenges and not just the coin grind. We need to have options when it comes to these microtransactions. Options for me personally are the sort of thing that then encourage me to spend $10 on a set of legendaries if I feel like the game is rewarding me in other ways with those cosmetics. So there's some unknowns in that system. There's some things I like. We're going to have to check back in on that once we have more information, hopefully in the coming days. Let's talk about all of the things we just talked about, because this is where Anthem starts to show some additional flaws that might be more frustrating for some than others. Those 4 pillars I mentioned, right? They're held together by this connective tissue, the glue that holds the pieces of the game together. Unfortunately, that's where a lot of the game's flaws lie. That's where we start to see a lot of what feels like dated game design. And the first one is the way that BioWare's handled these loading screens. Now, I'm well aware on the 22nd they're going to try and improve the loading screens. Let me make it very clear to you, though. I am on an SSD, a very fast SSD, on PC, and the load screens still suck. Even if they were cut in half, the thing that really irks me is that they allow these boring still image loading screens to cut into some of their most beautiful animation work. So when I leave Fort Tarsis, I get the Javelin suit up and airlock animation. You know what happens once the game matchmakes me with a group of players, or once it's ready to load into the actual experience? Maybe I'm playing solo. It cuts that animation short to show me a loading screen. This is like 2000 stuff, hiding loading screens behind far more interesting animation sets. You know, Tony Hawk's American Wasteland let us skate our way through a tunnel so it could hide its loading screens. That is better than looking at a still image. This is another head scratcher, dated piece of like old school game design that drives me up a wall. The loading screens are so frequent and they're so jarring. It's hard enough as a player to go from first person to first person cinematic to third person in an action sequence. The game does nothing to make those transitions seamless or smooth. It just gives you a black screen and then a loading screen. And again, those loading screens sometimes cut into some of their best animations. If there is any way BioWare can improve this, it needs to happen. Because when you're finished with the story, it doesn't matter. You'll still run in contracts. You're still constantly loading out of Fort Tarsis into strongholds, into the open world. Loading screens aren't going anywhere in this game. They might be made shorter, but I don't think they'll ever be made so short that something shouldn't be done to actually disguise them. You know, there's a good reason that Bungie was like, let's show the ships actually flying to the planet the player's going to and then show them going down to orbit. I'd rather stare at that loading screen for 5 minutes than stare at the loading screen we have in Anthem right now for 30 seconds. It is just not great game design, and I'm sure it's not intentional. I'm sure they're not like, yeah, ship it. I'm sure there were a lot of other technical issues that are there. If they can work that out in the future, it will make the transition across the many experiences that make up Anthem so much better than they currently are. Now, there's another issue that I have to talk about because I want to recommend to players on the 22nd that they be aware of this. Currently, if you matchmake for the game's story missions, not in quick play, but if you actually just matchmake for the missions straight out so you can get other people to play the story with you, the game will often throw you into a mission 1 to 2 minutes into the action. And again, I'm on an SSD. I don't think this has anything to do with loading. It's just about the game matchmaking you into instances that are already active. When this happens, you can miss out on vital character and story dialogue, and worse, you'll have to deal with the game's extremely strict bounding box that's going to teleport you to the group and put you in another loading screen. Now, on the 22nd, they're apparently making some modifications to that bounding box, so hopefully that will get better, but I still don't know what the hell is going on with this loading you into a mission late thing. I really recommend, if you start the game up, and if this happens to you even once, to go play the campaign on solo if you care at all about the story and the character dialogue. Until they make it very clear that they are doing something about this, it sucks to miss out on huge chunks of the game's narrative and story, especially when you actually feel invested in it like I was. I had this happen a lot. More often than I should have, and it was really frustrating. So again, just a word of warning, and hopefully that is something that BioWare is going to get on. I know people have been yelling at them about this, shouting at them about this on Twitter. No one is happy about missing out on chunks of story delivery because they get loaded into a mission, 1 to 2 minutes behind everyone else. So let's go ahead and wrap this review up. I think we once again find ourselves looking at a shared world shooter that very much has the framework of something that could be really, really good. And parts of it are already pretty darn good. I really do adore that core gameplay loop. I love the combat in this game. I love the flight, the mobility, the 4 javelins, their different abilities. The potential for builds in this game is through the roof. I'm so excited to be in Grandmaster 1, to be into that loot chase, looking for those perfect stat roll weapons, looking for those epics and the masterworks, getting into legendaries. Like, that's going to be a lot of fun. I could see myself spending a few hundred hours on just that portion of the Anthem experience. But a lot of the things that exist within that experience, that connect the experience, once again, are fragmented, they're flawed, they're broken, there's bugs all over the place, and the 22nd isn't going to fix all of them. What the game needs right now, what it needs as it moves forward into March, where it's supposed to start its roadmap, is a big old Operation Health. It needs something like Rainbow Six Siege got, it needs something like Sea of Thieves got with Shrouded Spoils. It needs to realize that adding more content Throwing more content at the current game isn't going to solve its problems. It's not going to stop players from leaving Anthem. It's not going to help bring new players into Anthem. What BioWare needs to do is they need to buckle down and focus 100% on fixing what is already there. They need to build up and strengthen the experience around the core gameplay. Look at feedback from the community. Look at the people who are going to actively be playing the game over the next month and really reconsider launching that first part of that roadmap in March. I have no problem in waiting another month. If BioWare can spend March making this game stronger and better, and again, strengthening everything around that core gameplay loop, that will be the best decision forward. Do it now. Do it before it's too late. Don't pull a Sea of Thieves and try and throw 3 expansions at it that no one cares about because the rest of the game is in shambles, and just get things straightened out. You know, get the game in a place where people can really appreciate that core gameplay loop, where they can appreciate, you know, the Grandmaster difficulties, the loot, and the potential for builds. That's what is most important to me right now, and I think that's what should be top priority for BioWare. And again, they're already demonstrating their ability to make rapid changes and rapid repairs to many of the problems Anthem has. So I hope this is very much an instance of a team that just needed more time, and now they're just going to start fixing these things out in the wild, and hopefully they can set that schedule and that roadmap straight, and they can do what they need to get this game in a better position than it is currently. They also need to get a freaking tutorial in the game, because it blows my mind that there is no tutorial for combos. Combos are one of the best parts of Anthem's combat, and the game doesn't spend any time teaching the player how to prime and detonate a combo. Do you know how many people are going to boot up this game? They're going to pick it up day one, a week after that, and they're going to have no idea for possibly dozens of hours how the combo system works. That's no bueno. You can't leave out one of the best bits of your combat. You can't do 0 to teach the player how one of the best bits of your combat system works. A tutorial needs to be put in the game at the start of the game, almost immediately when the player boots the game up and starts that story. It needs to get in there as soon as possible. So let's go ahead and quickly answer the question of whether or not you should buy Anthem. If you like Anthem's core gameplay experience, if you like what the demo had to offer, and you like the idea of smashing things and comboing things with your friends and diving into the Grandmaster difficulties and making those perfect builds, you will probably get your money's worth out of Anthem. And you can go along for the ride, and you can help BioWare make improvements to the experience. You can join it in development and see what happens there. If you've got only $60 to spend in the next 3 months, I would not buy Anthem. I would not recommend it for the person who doesn't have the money to spend on what is another shared world project that needs a lot of work and that has a bit that you can love. I would save that money. I'd go buy a game like Metro Exodus. I'd get your money's worth out of that. I'd consider The Division 2, see what reviews are like for that game. I would hold off. Give this game a few months, check back in and see what's up. And obviously the good thing about a game like Anthem with the free story DLC is that you're never going to get behind. The game is never going to suddenly cost $120 for you to get caught up and get in on the action. Maybe in 3 months it'll be on sale and you'll be able to jump in for $40 with all of the improvements the game has made over the past 3 months. For a lot of you, I think this is going to be a big wait. Again, ask yourself what you liked about Anthem based on what you played and based on what you've seen. Ask yourself how much you see yourself enjoying that. And if the answer is not that much, don't buy this game. Save your money, pick up something else, and wait. That's going to do it for me, guys. I hope I put a lot of you in a more clear state of mind for what Anthem is like currently, what it's going to be like on launch. Again, I'm very excited to see where BioWare takes things from here because there's a lot I love about this game. It needs some more love. Plain and simple. It needs some direction from the community. It needs some time in the open, on the frying pan, and hopefully BioWare can deliver that. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.